All right, looks like it's on. Hi, welcome. My name's Sean Smith. I'm with the College Project here in Lexington. We're a private counseling firm, work with high school students, like I'm assuming you guys all have, otherwise you wouldn't be here tonight. Just a show of hands, how many parents of freshmen do we have in here? Great. I'm also a parent of freshmen at Dunbar. Sophomores? Juniors? Any seniors, parents of seniors? Okay, good. Because it's kind of late in the game for seniors. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff tonight. Feel free to just stop me and ask questions as you go or as I go. I hope this is going to be somewhat interactive and informative. But you guys all got the folder. If you just turn to the first page. I wanted to talk about what college admissions is looking for in an applicant, just to start. And that, honestly, that varies from school to school. So we have a couple of schools represented here tonight. I know UK and Transy are both here. There's over 3,000 four-year colleges and universities just in the country alone. And each school, when they receive a student's application, is going to view it differently. So Transy is going to view a student's application differently than what UK is going to. I think it's pretty safe to say, though, that the first thing that they're going to look at is classroom performance. So GPA. Across the board, it's going to be easier for a student to get accepted to a selective school with a strong GPA and a subpar ACT or SAT score than vice versa. And we will definitely talk about ACT and SAT, but I don't want to discount those tests because they're still very important. But there's nothing in college admissions more important than a student's classroom performance. So GPA, GPA, GPA. I've worked with many students that have done very well in the classroom. They've taken AP classes, advanced classes. They've worked really hard. They have a strong GPA, but for whatever reason, they just can't perform well on an ACT or SAT test, or not up to their standards. They're going to get accepted to some good colleges. It may affect scholarships in some cases, but they're going to get accepted. Not everywhere, but they're going to get accepted to some good schools. More and more colleges are going test optional, meaning they no longer require the ACT or SAT. Transy is test optional. UK still requires the ACT. Most colleges still require the ACT or the SAT, either one. The next thing that they're going to look at is going to vary from school to school. They definitely want to see that the students challenge themselves, so they took advanced classes, they took AP classes, but that's kind of, you have to know your own student. Do you want them to work really hard in an AP class just to barely get a B? It's going to be impressive to the colleges that they challenge themselves, but it is going to affect their GPA. So that's a balancing act that you'll have to have with your own student. I recommend that the students challenge themselves as much as they possibly can without getting C's and D's, and more A's than B's if possible, and without killing their social life. They still need to have some kind of life outside the classroom, and extracurriculars are important, so that's on my list too. Extracurricular involvement. If you're looking at selective college admissions or selective scholarships, so like at UK, yes, it's selective, but it's not as selective as some other schools. The students are probably going to get accepted, but are they going to compete for the full ride scholarships, the Singletary scholarships, the full tuition scholarships? For those, they need to have the GPA, the ACT score, and leadership, community service, some kind of extracurricular involvement. So the students do need to be involved. And my recommendation to my students is don't do something just because you think it's going to look good on a college application. It might look good on a college application, but you don't know what these colleges are looking for. Do something because you have a passion for that, whatever it is, you have an interest in it. Because if you join a club freshman or sophomore year just so you think school XYZ is going to look favorably upon that club, how involved are you going to be? You might drop out by junior or senior year. To play a sport just because you think it's going to look good on a college application, how involved are you going to be? So find their interest, find their passion, and then they'll probably stay involved with it. And by junior or senior year, maybe they'll have a leadership role with whatever that organization is. It's going to be apparent on a college application if they're just joining clubs just to join the clubs. If they're really involved in those activities, that will also show. Because the colleges are going to ask, how long were you involved? How many hours did you spend? How many weeks per year did you spend on those activities? And then lastly, I put standardized tests. And in some cases, that might be the second thing these colleges look at. But again, as I mentioned earlier, more and more schools are going test optional, meaning if the student doesn't think the ACT or the SAT is the best indicator of the type of student they are, then don't sit it. If they do think it's indicative, then send the scores. Yes?
The schools that are test optional, is it cast a negative light if you don't?
No.
So if you're on the fence with, say, your GPA, could a good score on the SAT or SAT, if you took it, propel you to acceptance where maybe it would not have if you didn't?
If you're borderline with the GPA, a good score could definitely help. Right. Yeah. The only time you wouldn't send the test score is if you think the test score is going to hurt. So there are, probably one of the biggest name schools that's gone test optional in the last couple of years is University of Chicago. And that's one of the most selective schools in the country, and they don't require the ACT or SAT anymore. Wake Forest in North Carolina doesn't require it. So I know there's a few in Kentucky that don't, but Transy's the only one I can tell you off the top of my head that no longer require it. So that's something that you would probably want to talk with your admissions counselor as you're going through the process. You've identified colleges that your son or daughter is interested in. Speak with the admissions counselor and ask them, point blank, where they stand. So this is stuff that they could start doing freshman year. I mentioned I have twin boys that are freshmen here at Dunbar. I'm trying to get them involved, but they're not as involved as I'd like them to be. But right now we're focusing on GPA, so as long as the grades are there, I can't really complain. But they will get involved at some point. Your kids will probably meet them at some point. So, any other questions on this?
Just like the extracurricular, do they look at like if your kid has a job instead of doing that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. Working outside of school, that's a big thing for sure. Community service. Let's talk about community service. I just had this discussion with a family the other night. Community service looks good on a college application. But if you're doing community service, it's the same with any other club. If you're doing community service just to look good on a college application, what are you doing it for, really? Do community service because it's something you want to do. If there's an organization that's already doing something, then join it. If there's a passion or an interest you have and nobody else is doing it, start your own club. Start your own thing. I happen to be on the Site-Based Decision-Making Council here at Dunbar. It is easy to start a club here. So if you have a son or daughter that's interested in doing something here at Dunbar and making it an official club, get a teacher sponsor. It's easy. You bring it in front of SBDM. We meet once a month. I've yet to see anybody not approved. We pass it unanimously. But you do need a teacher sponsor. So it's pretty easy to get involved, but get involved in the things that they're actually interested in, and that includes the community service stuff. So, all right, the next page. Yes, go ahead.
How important is being in a sports team or sports?
It's as important as any other activity. I don't think playing football, baseball, lacrosse, anything like that looks better than being in Beta Club or Spanish Club. It's important if that's what you want to continue to do in college, for sure.
In my case, my daughter doesn't do any sports.
No, that's fine. No, it does not make a difference whatsoever. As long as she's involved in other things, that's fine. So this is where I usually address the younger students, but your junior's not too old yet. Finding the right fit, developing a college list. I went to UK. I was perfectly happy at UK, but if I had to do it all over again, I probably wouldn't have gone to UK. I just didn't know what my options were. UK is a perfectly fine school. I'm definitely not going to talk down to my alma mater, especially when they're here tonight. But is it the right fit for everybody? Just because mom and dad went there or your friends are going to school there, there's many good reasons to go to UK and stay home and go. Not to mention the least of which would be cost, potentially. But exploring the students' options and seeing what else is out there and then choosing to go to UK is a completely different thing. So I recommend that my students start exploring their options early. First and foremost, they should have an idea of what they want to study in college. Most high school students might have some ideas, but they kind of float around and change their mind all the time. But start at least exploring majors, exploring their interest. And then what colleges offer those programs, and what colleges are notoriously strong for those programs. Get a radius of from Lexington. How far away are they willing to look? Do they want to go 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, be within a drivable distance of home? Do they want to go out to the coast, California, New York, wherever? and start finding those schools that offer the programs or notoriously strong for those programs that fit whatever the radius is. And then there's all sorts of different types of schools. Excuse me. Private, public, research universities, liberal arts, transient center are 1,200, 1,400 students. UK's 23,000 students. What environment would they be most successful in? What environment do they think would be the best environment? Excuse me, I'm losing my voice already. This is early. Would they think would be the best environment for them? And then start finding schools that match. There's tons of resources online. I'm sure in the guidance office, in the college career office, there's tons of resources that can help identify these colleges. And then once they've identified those schools and they've done the research and they found the schools that they're most interested in, do a college visit. Freshman year might be a little too early for college visits, but sophomore and junior year, that's perfect time to go. Senior year, in many cases, might be a little too late. I've spent the last 2 days scheduling college visits for some of my students over spring break. None of my students want to do college visits over spring break, but that's a perfect time to go because our spring break is different than the college's spring break. You have the time available, go do it. And if they're really undecided about big school, small school, go visit UK and Transy or UK and Georgetown College and just compare and contrast the two. Again, there's no right or wrong answer. They're both really good schools. We have a lot of really good schools within an hour or two of Lexington. But what type of environment would be best for them? And ideally, you go during the school year because when you go in the middle of June or July, especially to a school like Transy or Center or Georgetown, the campus might be empty. There might not be very many students on campus. You want to go when the students are there. You can see the students interact with one another, potentially sit in on a class. A typical college visit is an info session with the admissions office. At a small school, it would more than likely be a one-on-one info session and then a student-led campus tour. At a school like UK, it would probably be a large group information session. And they're just going to go over the admissions process, financial aid, that kind of stuff, and then show you some classroom buildings, library, dorm rooms, cafeteria. You can schedule specific meetings with a department head, probably later in the high school career, like junior, senior year, you can schedule some overnight visits where they actually set you up with a student, spend the night in the dorms, and then go visit a class, sit in on a class the next day. So there's all sorts of things. I think the first initial visit, though, is just get a feel for the campus, get a feel for the environment. If that's a type of school that they're interested in, then we can pursue it further and investigate. So last on my list might be first on your all's list, and that's cost. Obviously, the cost of college has gone through the roof. I've been doing this for 20 years. It's crazy to think what the tuition was at UK just 20 years ago. I think I read recently it's roughly 4 times the rate of inflation, the cost of the inflation for tuition. So it's definitely crazy. But don't eliminate a school because of cost right off the bat. You might have to eliminate that school later on down the road, but don't eliminate a school initially because of cost, because there's lots of ways to make it more affordable. Very few students are going to pay sticker price, especially at the private universities. You're looking at some schools with $70,000 to $80,000 cost of attendance per year. Very few students are actually going to pay that out of pocket. The question is how much can they offer you? But there's scholarships, need-based aid. There's lots of ways to make it more affordable. And I see students make private schools just as affordable as UK all the time. So it's definitely doable. So don't eliminate a school because of cost, but have your safety nets. Have the schools that you're pretty sure, if not certain, that they can get accepted to, and if all else fails, will fit into the family budget, whether that's UK or BCTC or whatever it is. There's definitely some affordable options out there. But when you're initially looking at schools and trying to find the right fit, you're going to look at that sticker price and it's going to scare you for sure. But don't let it scare you too much that you don't actually go investigate it further, because a lot of students will get financial aid. So questions on this stuff, on the college fit? I didn't write any of this on the sheets, but there's some really good resources if you want to write this down. Colleges.niche, or niche, however you want to pronounce that, niche.com, colleges.niche. CAPX, CAPPEX.com, Those are great resources to research colleges. The College Board that owns the SAT and AP exams, they have a lot of great resources on their websites as well. What I like about Niche and CapX, they're not affiliated with any specific colleges. They're going to give you unbiased reviews. Whereas the school's websites, which you should be using, I mean, your son or daughter should be navigating the school's websites as well, the college's websites. But anything on their website and any brochures you get, any marketing pieces that you get, that's exactly what they are. They're marketing pieces. So they're going to try to make the school look as awesome as possible. They're not going to lie to you, but they're going to make it look as good as they possibly can. So use some outside resources. One that I use that's not online, you'd have to actually order the book. It's called RUGS, RUGG''S, Recommendations on the Colleges. And it's produced by Frederick Rugg. He's a former college admissions counselor.
It's just called RUGS?
RUGS, RUGG''S, RUGS, Recommendations on the Colleges. It's a PDF. He produces one every year. So, okay. So let's fast forward to senior year, or a little bit before senior year. So rising seniors. This is where my junior's in the room. This is for you. So, most college applications will become available around August 1st prior to the start of senior year. Some cases earlier, but most of them will come available August 1st. Every school they apply to is going to have a different deadline for admissions, different deadline for scholarships, different requirements for admission, different requirements for scholarships. So while I don't recommend applying to 20 or 30 different colleges, many seniors do, that's a lot to keep up with. It's a lot to keep up with. I'd say 3, 4, 5 colleges is a pretty good list. Most of my seniors are probably applying to somewhere between 5 and 10 colleges. But August 1st is the date that the Common App and the Coalition App become available. The Common App specifically, Coalition App a little less so, are ways to apply to multiple schools using one application. That's loud. Coalition.
Coalition?
In-state Common App schools last year were UK, Transy, Center, EKU, Asbury, Bellarmine, maybe 1 or 2 more. So there's at least 5 or 6 schools in Kentucky that accept the Common App. Georgetown College, I don't think did. Maybe they may have been new last year and I just didn't recognize it, but I don't think they were on the Common App. No other public school. UK is the only public school that accepts the Common App. Around Kentucky, University of Cincinnati accepts Common App. Xavier in Cincinnati, University of Dayton, Miami of Ohio, Ohio State, those are just the Ohio schools, all accept the Common App. So there was, I think, roughly 850 colleges nationwide that accepted the Common App. Every Ivy League school accepts the Common App. Vanderbilt, Duke, Notre Dame, some of the big name schools all accept the Common App. Now the Common App itself, I prefer the Common App to the Coalition App, but they're basically the same thing. The Common App itself is going to be a pretty lengthy application. They're going to ask just about everything under the sun and have one essay. That essay the essay prompts will get released probably in April or May. So sometime this spring, the Common App will release their essay prompts, and they haven't changed in the past few years, so it's very likely they'll be the same. So that's something your junior/rising senior could actually start working on over the summer before the actual applications even become available. And the essay is or can be a pretty important part to the application process. So each school that accepts the Common App could have supplemental information. And in UK's case, they did have an additional essay for all students and an additional essay if they're applying to the Honors College or competitive scholarships. So again, each school is going to have different requirements. UK did not require any teacher recommendations, but some schools will require 1 or 2, plus the counselor recommendation. That's all done on the Common App. It's very easy to do, especially if your student goes to Dunbar. It's very easy to email your counselors, email your teachers. But you should know the difference between the different deadlines. And not every school is going to offer all these. There's early decision. So if you ever see ED, that's early decision. Early decision is a binding agreement that you're making with the college. That means if they accept you, you're going. So you're telling that school, when you submit that application, if you accept me, I'm coming to school there. So that's a big decision to make early in the process, very early in the process. It's usually right around November 1st for a lot of schools. Some schools will have an early decision 1 and an early decision 2. Early decision 2 is probably going to be like January 1st, but it's still the same thing. It's a binding agreement. I would recommend going early decision to a college if you're unsure of your chances of getting accepted. Early decision can increase your chances of getting accepted at some schools. In some cases, double your chances of getting accepted. And you've met with financial aid, and they've given you an estimate that fits within your budget. If that's the case, and your son or daughter's gung-ho on this school, they're dead set, it's their dream school, then by all means go early decision. But if you haven't met with financial aid and you don't know what kind of package they're going to offer you, and you can't afford the sticker price, then don't go early decision. Or if you think they're probably going to get accepted anyway without early decision, then there's no reason to go early decision. Early action is the next one, that's EA. Early action is just an earlier deadline. You apply early, you find out early, you probably get your scholarship and financial aid offers early, but you still don't have to make a decision until May 1st. May 1st of the senior year is kind of the national signing date. That's when you need to let every college know where you're going. So early action, unless you're waiting on better grades or better test scores, there's really no reason not to go early action. So I do encourage all of my students to go early action. Now, not every school is going to offer these. Some just have a deadline, that's when you apply. And RD is just the regular decision. Rolling admissions, and UK is rolling admissions. That means as soon as they receive all of the parts of your application, they're going to notify you. So if they receive your application, your transcript, recommendations, test scores, as soon as they have all of that, they reviewed it, they're going to let you know. In many cases, that could be 2 to 3 weeks. But the other schools that have these deadlines, they're not going to let you know until sometime after that deadline. So if you apply in October and the deadline was December 1st, you're not going to know until sometime after December 1st. So the different components to an application, obviously the bio, the extracurricular activities, counselor recommendation or counselor report. Sometimes the counselors don't really know your son or daughter very well, so they can't write a recommendation, but they can still write a report. Teacher evaluations or teacher recommendations, that is something that I would not wait until the week before it's due to get the recommendations to ask a teacher. This is a little extreme, but I've had many seniors that have emailed their teachers over the summer before school even starts and asked if they would write a recommendation for them.
Actually, it's helpful as many students as there are.
Exactly. Some teachers will put a limit on how many they'll write. They'll say, I'll write 10 recommendations. The first 10 students to ask me or fill out this form will get it. So it's not too extreme to email the teachers over the summer and ask for a recommendation. But definitely give them more than just a week or two. The first week or two of school would probably be, in most cases, plenty enough time to get your recommendations in. Very few schools that require recommendations are going to require a specific teacher, but some will. So you want to verify that with the admissions offices. Some will want a math and a humanities, or a math and an English, or something like that, or math and science. It just depends on the colleges you're applying to. And very few schools require recommendations, period. If you're looking at the whole 3,000 colleges out there, it's a very small percentage that actually require teacher recommendations. The ones that do usually only require one. Some will require two. If you have a school that requires one recommendation, don't send 5, because at least 3 of them are going to get pitched. They're not going to review them. They're not going to look at it. Now, if you have a school that requires 1 and you want to send 2, that's probably fine. But don't go overboard with your recommendations. And if they require teacher recommendations, make sure it is a teacher that your son or daughter has had in class. They can speak to not only their classroom performance, because that shows up on the transcript. They can see how well they did in the class. But their work ethic, maybe character. If this teacher happens to know them a little bit outside of the classroom, that would be ideal. That would be the ideal scenario. So ask the teachers early. We touched on the essay a little bit. Really, some schools do have specific prompts and they want you to address them. The Common App gives you 6 specific prompts plus topic of your choice. But the prompt really isn't that important. What they want to know is what they can't already tell by reading your application. So for example, on the Common App, they're going to see your transcript. They're going to see the type of student you are. They're going to see what types of classes you've taken. You're going to list up to 10 extracurricular activities that you've been involved with since the beginning of high school. For each activity, you have to explain your role within that activity. You have to tell what years of high school, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, you participated, and approximately how many weeks per year and how many hours per week you spent doing that activity. You're going to list up to 5 honors or awards, academic achievements. So other than all that, what do you think is important for them to know about you? That's what your essay should be. And it should obviously be well written. It should be proofed. It should be edited by somebody you trust. And you should not mention the name of any specific college in case another college happens to read that same essay and sees a different school in there. So again, you can start on this over the summer. There's no reason why you should be writing your college essay the night before it's due. No reason whatsoever. There's tons of examples out there. Johns Hopkins University actually publishes students' essays that they've liked. So you can just Google Johns Hopkins essays that worked and you can see a ton of sample essays that this particular school liked. There's really no right or wrong way to write a college, well, there are wrong ways to write a college essay. There's no real one right way to write a college essay. As long as the reader is going to get a better sense of who they are, what type of person they are, what makes them tick. It can be funny, it can be sad. I tell my students, make them laugh or make them cry. If you can do both in the same essay, you're golden. So just tell a story, give the reader a better sense of who you are. That's what the college essay is about. This past year, UK's additional essay for honors college and competitive scholarships, which by the way is the same essay, serves 2 different purposes, was the Mount Rushmore essay. And I probably read 40 Mount Rushmore essays. You had to create your own Mount Rushmore. If you could create your own Mount Rushmore, what 4 characters would you put on it? Where would you put it and why? And what would you make it out of? So I had a ton of students writing the Mount Rushmore essay because I had a ton of students applying to UK honors program. So that was unique. Obviously, you'd have to address that specific question, but in general, normally you don't have to address anything specific as long as you're answering the rest of the questions. So, questions about the admissions process? Let's see how much time we have. Yep.
So you talk about early education. From your statement, it appears that it is a binding contract. You cannot say, no, I don't want to come there. Is that something that is legally binding?
It is a binding agreement. You're telling the colleges that.
Legally?
I don't think it's legally. No, the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to lose your deposit if you change your mind. So you pay a deposit, an enrollment deposit. They're not going to return your deposit.
Oh my God.
But then the other thing that you're required to do is if you've applied to multiple colleges, you have to contact those colleges and withdraw your application. So if let's say you've gone early decision to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt accepts you. But while you're waiting to hear from Vanderbilt, you applied to 4 or 5 other colleges. Vanderbilt accepts you, you send your enrollment deposit in, then you change your mind and decide you don't want to go to Vanderbilt. You lose your enrollment deposit, and then you've already contacted all these other schools and withdrawn your admissions applications. So now you're kind of left with not many options. So no, nobody's going to jail over it, but it is an agreement that you're making with the colleges.
So those binding agreements, though, how much, just out of curiosity, are you submit?
250 to 500. Yeah.
I don't know, is it like portion scholarship?
No, it's not the portion of tuition. No, it's a very small. 250 to 500 it's a lot of money, but it's nothing compared to the tuition. Right. Yeah. So perfect segue. Speaking of tuition, financial aid and scholarships. So most every school will offer some type of academic or merit scholarship. Not every school does. The Ivy Leagues don't. There's plenty of schools that do not, but most every school does offer some form of merit or academic scholarships. Those are typically based on ACT, so ACT score or SAT score, and GPA. The more selective scholarships, that's when they're going to look at your extracurricular involvement, community service, leadership, essays, that kind of stuff. So before the application season starts, or while you're in the midst of the application season, you need to look into every single school that they're applying to and see what scholarships are available and how to apply for them. In some cases, the admissions application serves as the scholarship application. As long as you apply by this deadline, you're going to be considered for all of our scholarships. In a lot of cases, there will be additional applications or additional essays for some of the top tier scholarships. Some schools offer specific scholarships for community service or for leadership that will require additional applications. So look into every scholarship at every school that they're applying to see if they're qualified. One, I mean, don't waste their time applying for something they're not qualified for, but definitely look at every opportunity because every school is going to be different and the process at every school is very different. Talent scholarships. A lot of people will think automatically athletics, but yes, athletics are one type of talent scholarship, but there's art, music, theater, drama, all sorts of different talent scholarships potentially at these colleges. I know Center College has a music scholarship. I think that's up to $5,000 additional, and you don't have to be a music major. Center also offers a foreign language scholarship up to $5,000 where you have to interview. You need to be proficient in that language because you're going to interview in that language in order to qualify for the scholarship. So there's a lot of different talent type scholarships out there. In many cases for music and theater, you do have to major in that, but some cases you don't. You just have to agree to participate in an ensemble or whatever, so many hours per semester. So that's probably the most predictable type of financial aid is academic or merit and talent-based scholarships. You can usually get a pretty good idea going into senior year. You know the ACT is this or the SAT and the GPA is this. I'm probably going to qualify for roughly this much in scholarship money, academic scholarship money. Kind of a little bit less predictable is the need-based aid. So the FAFSA is the main financial aid form that every school will require to be considered for need-based aid. And the FAFSA will come out October 1st of the student's senior year. And you want to submit the FAFSA as soon as possible after October 1st. And by that, I mean probably sometime in the next month, 6 weeks. So by Thanksgiving, try to have your FAFSA submitted. It's not necessary to get on at midnight October 1st and submit it, but you do want to submit it as early as possible. I can do an entirely separate workshop on the financial aid, so I don't want to get into a lot of specifics, but the FAFSA is going to look at parents' income, parents' assets, students' income, students' assets. There's wild mathematical formula that will spit out a number called your EFC, or your expected family contribution. This is what the federal government thinks that you guys can afford for 1 year of college. The colleges you choose will receive that information, and they'll compare it to the cost of attendance at their school. So cost of attendance is tuition, room, board, books, fees. So Center, I know this coming year is like $54,500. So $54,500 is their cost of attendance. You have an EFC of $20,000. That's a pretty high EFC. By the way, the federal government thinks you guys can afford a lot more than what you guys think you can afford. But your need at Center is now $34,500. Well, if your son received a $20,000 scholarship, now your need is only $14,500. So they're going to come up with as much grant, work study, or loan money as they can to meet most, if not all, of your demonstrated needs. So when you hear the term demonstrated need, that's your demonstrated need. The gap between the EFC and the cost of attendance is your demonstrated need.
Did you say Center was 54?
Yes. Yeah. Transie's probably right behind it. Very, very close to it. So Center, Transy, Bellarmine, those are the three most expensive in Kentucky. But put that in perspective, Vanderbilt's 77. So it's a bargain. UK with cost of attendance, UK is right around 30. But tuition, room, and board is probably around 27.
So it costs as much for room and board there as it does for tuition.
Actually, the average room and board is a little bit higher than the tuition at UK. It's because you're living in these 5-star resorts now at UK.
Sure.
Yeah, with Brandon County.
Yep, much better than the concrete block dorms I lived in. So, there is another form called the CSS Profile. Nobody in Kentucky requires that form, but there are plenty of colleges nationwide that do. The colleges that require the CSS Profile will also require the FAFSA. So it'll be 2 forms that you'll need. The profile is very extensive. There's very little that you're going to hide from the profile. On the FAFSA, there's ways to hide some assets and stuff, but on the profile, they're going to ask everything. The FAFSA, when they look at your assets, they do not look at your retirement accounts. They do not ask the value of your home, the value of your business unless you have more than 100 employees, the value of your vehicles, make, model, year, any of that stuff. They don't ask any of that. The profile asks all of that. The profile will ask the purchase price, purchase year, equity, monthly mortgage payment, all on every home you own, and make, model, year, and Blue Book price of each vehicle, the total value of your retirement accounts. They actually ask you how much you think you're going to earn next year, how much do you think your son or daughter is going to earn the summer between senior year and freshman year. So they ask you to predict. So there's nothing that you're going to hide from the profile. But the schools that require the profile typically are the most generous. So they're just making sure that they're giving their aid. They're using the profile to give their money away, not federal money. They use the FAFSA to give away federal and state money.
So the FAFSA is more of a straight income-based decision? Pretty
much. Well, income and assets, but the assets aren't. Most families, I don't want to speak for everybody, most families have their assets in their retirement, life insurance, and their home. None of those are reported on the FAFSA. They're all reported on the CSS Profile. So,
And that's basically for schools if you want to go out of state.
out of state, mostly private, some public.
Is there any online website where we could cite these numbers and see what comes
Yes.
up?
Yes, if you go to, well, actually, a lot of these schools have net price calculators. So if you just go to whatever school you're interested in and plug in the net price calculator, they'll ask you a bunch of information, but that will include scholarships. If you go to College Board, Google College Board Financial Aid Calculator. And there will be 2 methods. There'll be the federal methodology, that's FAFSA, and then the institutional methodology, that's CSS Profile. And they'll ask you a series of questions, and they'll give you a pretty good idea of what your EFC is going to be. So that's all I have. I'm open for questions. So
Calculator is called net.
net price calculator, a lot of colleges will have those on their website. And just go to the website and use the search bar.
Okay.
If not, you can probably just Google it. So
Have you ever looked at College Simply?
I've not. No, College Simply.
I know that .org gives details on how many scholarships are given and
Okay.
what kind of salary you can expect to come out with what kind of
With the
program.
degree. Yeah. Okay.
Like Vanderbilt. So.
Right. That's it. Yeah. College Simply. I'll have to look that up. Yes, sir.
So some of these in colleges, for example, University of Chicago, they have these pre-college summer programs. So are they useful in admission process?
Yes and no. If you go to University of Chicago's the summer college programs, it's not going to help you get accepted to University of Chicago necessarily. It's going to look good on a college application wherever you apply. Is it going to look better than Governor Scholars Program? Probably not. Any kind of summer academic program or community service-based program will look good on a college application. It does not necessarily give you an advantage at that school. Unless while you're there you happen to meet somebody from admissions that can write you a recommendation or something like that, but otherwise no. No. And those are usually pretty pricey.
Yes.
Pretty expensive. So, yes.
ACT, SAT.
Good question.
Should they take both?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Again, I've been doing this for 20 years. I remember a time when there were colleges that accepted ACT or SAT, and that's not the case anymore. Every college will accept either or that I'm aware of. I shouldn't speak for every college, but I don't know of any college that doesn't. And students typically perform better on one than the other. So I know here at Dunbar, the sophomores have to take the PSAT. So the PSAT is usually a pretty good indicator of how well you'll perform on the ACT. And all sophomores are going to take the ACT on March 10th, along with the juniors. So you could probably just compare the two, and whichever one is the stronger one, that's the one I would move forward with. Content-wise, there's not a lot of difference between the two tests. Like what they're being tested on is pretty similar. It's just the format of the two tests are very different. So SAT gives more time, so students that struggle finishing sections on time, SAT might be the better test. There's no science section on the SAT. So if the students struggle with the science section on the ACT, they might like the SAT better.
There's
So-
no science on SAT.
There's no science section. There's science reading passages, but there's no science section. It's basically English, reading, and math on the SAT. So, good. Well, thank you guys for coming out.
Thank you.
Make sure I turn this thing off.